pleasure to be with you here this morning and to talk about my favorite subject, Bahrain. Let me start by just giving an overview of what I'm going to be speaking about. Bahrain is a pioneer in diversification, comprehensive reforms in recent times, and continuing on the development drive, the way forward. To start, I'll take you back a few decades, basically the origins. We started, of course, with an economy that was built on pearling. Oil was discovered, and from then we moved on to diversification. Started with the refinery, then we learned how to use gas better by building the aluminum smelter, and from then we moved to diversify our economy even more, looking at financial services, banking, telecommunications, and comprehensive reforms to stimulate and further diversify our economy. And into the future, we're looking at to continue pushing towards tourism, renewable services, etc. Bahrain is not endowed with huge reserves of oil, which helped us in the beginning to think very quickly about how we're going to be dealing with issues of diversification. Looking at the GCC very quickly, we see that within the GCC, we're all focused on higher public sector employment, increased spending on health, infrastructure, and education. We all focused on growing living standards and increased support for the private sector. And we all focused on diversifying with different degrees away from oil. I think Bahrain needed to do more because, as I said, we had lower oil reserves. I'm going quickly through the first slides because I think the later ones are more interesting. But basically how we diversified our economy started with aluminum, moved on to financial services, from that shipbuilding, downstream aluminum in Belexico and so on, Garmco, and diversification into petrochemicals, telecom, and so on. And this is just showing over time how the economy was developed. On the political side, which I think is important to touch on, it's always the most important enabler in any society. Restarting our parliament and restarting and developing the separation between judiciary, legislative authority, and government was an important part of the development of Bahrain's recent history. In judiciary, the independent judiciary in line with separation of powers enshrined in the Constitution, rule of law, independence of the judges, as well as due process guaranteed by the Constitution. We see the development of the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Judicial Council, public prosecution as independent from the executive authority. On the legislative side, we see the election conducted every 4 years, government program and budget now have to be approved by Parliament, and 2012 constitutional amendments, more legislative oversight was actually given to the elected chamber. And of course, the lower house, the Nawab, is actually elected. The upper house, the Shura, is appointed. And within government, as I said earlier, it's appointed by the king, but it has to be approved through the approval of the program of the government to be voted on by Parliament. And government spending is also reviewed and assessed by the National Audit Court, which publishes an independent report that goes to Parliament and it's public. Within the government, we also see the establishment of the governance, the municipal councils, the Supreme Council for Women. That body helped enhance the role for women within Bahrain society significantly more than what it was before, although women always contributed to society in Bahrain. But since the establishment of that body, we see a much bigger role for women in society. And the Bahrain Institute for Political Development, National Institution for Human Rights, and the Ombudsman. These political changes help us put Bahrain in a better position to deal with the economic challenges. And since 2000, early movers in terms of development were the labor market reform. The labor market reform was basically to set up a body called Tamkeen, which is basically a translation of enabling, or enablement. What it does is we have a labor market regulator that charges a set fee for every foreign worker that goes into a fund, and this fund uses the money to help increase efficiency, training, help smaller businesses, and develop a much better, more efficient labor market. Within that labor reform was also the ability for foreign workers to change jobs as and when they will, not to wait for the sponsor to allow them, but they have the right to move from one job to another to make a market more fluid and more vibrant. And I think we can see the effects of this on Bahrain's growth. The attraction of foreign direct investment, of course, is also important, but liberalization of the telecom sector. We moved from one strong, good telecom operator into a much larger market, much clearer market, where people can compete, where you could buy services from different providers, and it made for a much better growth in the service quality and also an improvement in prices. And infrastructure and technology, of course, we see the development of the deep sea port, the logistics zone, and the network that supports the technology. Some of the important points to mention was the stable and steady growth in real GDP. 2/3 of the financial services workforce are Bahrainis, of which 37% are women. And very important, FDI stock is 54% of nominal GDP, more than double the regional average. So where have we gone since 2000? Is basically in this simple chart. We moved from an economy that is the size of which was 3,408 to 12,807 million Bahraini dinars. And you can see the diversification, mining and quarrying, which is oil, 44% down to 21%. This is where the economy has moved from 2000 to 2014. What's important is what are the challenges that are facing us and where are we going from here? We've had good growth, 4.9%. Just to compare 2013-14, we see, real GDP growth, 5.3%, 4.5% in 2014. Non-hydrocarbon sector is growing. Hydrocarbon sector, I have to explain this. There was a maintenance on the main field that we have the year before, so this is why you see the growth of 15% in this slide. And unemployment rate, 4.8 to 3.8, which has been a great success for the government of Bahrain's plans to reduce unemployment. We pay unemployment benefits, so we make sure that the unemployed register to get their benefits, and because of that, we believe we have a very accurate figure on the unemployment. The challenge is always improving the average wages, the average salaries, the average income, and that's always a challenge. We live in a wealthy neighborhood, and expectations are different in the GCC. Now, the next slide is basically talking about competitive advantages for Bahrain. We are a zero tax jurisdiction. 100% foreign ownership is possible. Technology network readiness, liberalization of the telecom market, financial services are sophisticated. We have more than 400 institutions based in Bahrain, centrally located within the Gulf, and the GCC consumers, of course, in the region are all accessible from Bahrain. And we have some very good indicators. We just wanted to list them for you here to see that it's not just us saying that we're good. The next slide is basically talking about Bahrain's vision. What do we aim to strive for? The vision was developed for 2030, and our goal is to have a robust economic growth that benefits the people, an efficient and effective government, a just and thriving society. And I think the key words for us is productivity and skills, to make sure that we have the right capability on the ground. When people are productive, they can earn more, they can improve their life, they can do things better, and feel more satisfied with their own economy. Enablers for Bahrain. People. Our people, the main asset, as we have always said. Comprehensive education reform in 2015 was very important. Creation of the Quality Assurance Authority to ensure quality in primary, secondary, and tertiary education in Bahrain. Highly skilled talent in sectors of the economy and 14% of government expenditures directed towards education. We think investment in people is our primary asset. Finance, of course, we have a very strong financial sector, but what's more important is the investment that has gone into setting up from the microbanks to the development bank with the assistance of Tamkeen. We think we've enabled small business to access capital very easily in Bahrain. And with that, we see a lot of small businesses, small ideas, given the power to actually set up and move on. More work needs to be done other than financing on linking small business with universities and learning centers to help the other side of having business men and women work together to develop business ideas. Infrastructure, access to infrastructure including deep sea port, the airport, the causeway to Saudi Arabia, which is one of our biggest assets, highly competitive and fully liberalized telecommunication market, improved physical infrastructure, roads, utilities, renewable energy, etc., and dedicated incubators for business startup, which we believe is critically important. And rule of law, very important. When something goes wrong, you want to make sure you get your rights taken care of efficiently and quickly, stable, reliable regulatory framework which recognizes rule of law, transparent, business-friendly commercial environment, arbitration center for fast and transparent resolution for commercial disputes. Now, where is our economy going? And this is basically where we think we can focus on and do well within our economy, is basically looking at tourism. We think is a #1 sector for Bahrain's growth in the coming couple of decades. Logistics services, Islamic finance, business services, healthcare. And I put agriculture there because it's just fun for us to always recognize that in the middle of the desert, using hydroponics and technology, today you can actually grow produce. We won't export anything from Bahrain, but we can produce more locally because of the technologies that are involved with hydroponics, fish farming, hydroponics, and so on. So it's something that actually involves very high quality production and capability, but really the big money will come from tourism, logistics, Islamic finance, and business services. This is a very quick overview of about 5 decades in a very short period of time, but I'll be ready to answer any questions, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.